More hills, more eyes. Actually, it's more hills, less eyes, really, because there's only two hillbillies this time. The Hills Have Eyes 2 is about a group of motorcycle enthusiasts who, along with their various partners and hangers-on, decide to rent a bus and travel to a race meeting that's taking place at the other side of the desert that they live near. Picture race wars from the first Fast and the Furious movie, but with motorbikes, and you're probably not far off. But this bus never makes it to its destination because halfway there they have to change direction and go down a stretch of highway that they didn't originally intend to go down, and the bus ends up breaking down at some kind of abandoned mine in the middle of the deserty hills, and it turns out a couple of the hillbillies from the first movie are still floating around ready to pick up on their murderous ways. It's not a bad setup on paper. It was directed again by Wes Craven. I don't think he wanted to come back and do a sequel for this. I think he was cajoled into it for financial reasons. This probably does have less of a budget than the first movie. It definitely feels a little bit rushed. The first act in particular is a complete mess. The finale's not strong as well. There is a pretty decent chunk in the middle of this film, which is just basically 45 minutes of good solid slasher action. That's what saves this from being a total washout. But I want to start by talking about the beginning of the movie because it really riles me up, actually. It's so badly put together. The first scene involves a character from the first movie, Bobby. He's talking to a psychiatrist about how he's never fully gotten over the events from the first film. But I don't understand why we're watching this because Bobby literally drops out of the film 5 minutes later. So I don't understand why this scene is there. I don't get why they went to the lengths of bringing this actor back. Why? You know who we should have had talking to the psychiatrist? Ruby, that Mad Max 2 style peasant girl who was in the first movie and then escaped that life. She's back this time, played by the same actress. Not that I could tell until I actually went and checked a cast list afterwards. But she's actually in this movie for the duration. So it would have made sense to have her speaking to a psychiatrist about how she's managed to integrate herself into society. And that could have been the first part of a long arc that we see throughout part two involving her. We could have even had some flashbacks about her opening day at college or her first kiss or whatever, or the first time she went and bought herself some decent clothes. Instead, we get some other flashbacks, which are basically clips of the first movie. And this brings me to my second complaint about the first act, the flashbacks. The flashbacks are just absolutely horrible in the beginning of this. I get that in a lot of older horror sequels, they did have flashbacks at the start of the films to just remind you about what went on the first time around. Thankfully, you don't see that a lot in more modern day horror films, but this is one of the worst examples I've ever seen of it. At least in Friday the 13th Part 2, we get flashbacks, but they're all lumped together. And nowadays, with the modern Blu-ray players and stuff, you can just fast forward to the bit with the blonde in the apartment and then off you go. But in The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, the flashbacks are all separated into like separate parcels of flashbacks that appear every now and again throughout the first act. And it's so frustrating. Every time you think you've got through the final one, there's another one just waiting for you. And it's like, no, don't do that. I mean, in total, the flashbacks here only add up to maybe 6 or 7 minutes, I think. But it feels longer than that, and they're just totally pointless. This is time that could have been spent developing the characters. There's not much time in any horror film usually because of the limited runtime that's usually 90 minutes. There's never that much time to develop characters, so when you waste that time on flashbacks, you're really and unnecessarily handicapping yourself. And in this particular movie, there's 8 protagonists, I think, quite a few characters for us to get to know in the first half an hour. It only feels like we get to know maybe 2 or 3 of them at most by the time we get to the mine. One of them's blind, and I didn't even realise until halfway through this movie. When it comes to the character of Ruby, I will be fair and say that she was almost definitely the most worthwhile person to bring back from film number 1. There was always the potential for more story with her because of the fact that the hillbillies are her family. Maybe there's some unfinished business in her mind. the other three survivors, that there was never any realistic way of bringing them back to the desert without it feeling really contrived. Having said that, Ruby is still not treated that well in this film by whoever's written the script. For one thing, she's been dressed in a really snazzy way, like she's some city high flyer from New York. She's the poshest dresser of everybody on the bus. I think they should have gone a different direction and had her dressed in like, you know, jeans with holes in and like a t-shirt and dodgy makeup and stuff to show that, you know, she's gotten away from the hillbilly lifestyle, but she's not fully over her history. You know, there's still some emotional baggage there, and then you've got an interesting journey for her having to go back into that wilderness. As it is, it looks like she's well over her past at the start of this movie. Also, towards the end, and I'm going into spoiler territory now, 3, 2, 1. Her death is really offhand. Like it's the most unceremonious death you could imagine for a character like this. 1 minute she's fine, and then something just randomly happens, and boom, she's dead. And then we switch scenes, and we never see her again. But it's really unceremonious. It's just like, I feel like Ruby's death should have been far more emotional, given the fact that we followed this character for 1.5 movies, going on 2 movies. As it is, it's like she's just brushed aside as if she's nothing, as if she's a brand new character somehow. The rest of the protagonists are fine. There are even a couple of good ones. I really liked Cass, the blind girl. Very interesting to have a final girl who's blind. So Mike Flanagan wasn't the first one to have a disabled final girl. I also really liked Foster, the black guy. I thought he was exceptionally funny, and there were no irritating characters on the bus. That's definitely something positive to say. I'm not so keen on the villains in this. There are only 2 of them this time, as I've already said. One of them is a returning Michael Berryman. I forget what his character's name is. There's a bit of a cheat here, because clearly at the end of the first movie he was shown to be having his throat ripped out by a dog, but that seems to have not actually happened coming into this film. We see the actor's throat very, very clearly in this film, and there's not even a scar there. I think they really should have at least acknowledged the fact that he was attacked viciously by a dog. They could have had like bandages, or they could have just made the character hoarse somehow. This character isn't even that great anyway. I mean, he was okay in the first movie, but I think the reason they've brought him back, the actor has an interesting look, but he's not playing a great character particularly. He feels like an adult at a children's party who insists on joining in with hide and seek. He's just a bit cheesy, and he definitely feels like he's overstayed his welcome by coming back for a second film. The other villain, Reaper, a new character, there's just nothing to him. He's like a bearded pirate. I don't think he even speaks until about 5 minutes from the end. Supposedly he's the brother of the main father figure from the first movie, but I think the actor here looks too young for that, given that 8 years have passed since the first movie. To look at, the guy's a bit of a joke. He looks like a member of a medieval cosplaying club. Together, the 2 of them, they're just a couple of thugs. You know, this is a far cry from the interesting family hierarchy we had with the villains in the first movie. What we get here is just so much less, and I'm not just talking about numbers. As I hinted earlier, the film does get good after a while, and I would say this is around about when the good guys turn up at the mine. Amusingly, the 2 alpha males of the group, once they realise that hillbillies are after them, they get all macho, they jump on their motorbikes and they chase the hillbillies into the hills. In Crocodile Dundee 2, one of the villains says to another villain, "Never chase a snake into a cornfield." These 2 adrenaline junkie idiots clearly never watched Crocodile Dundee 2, though it might have come out after this film, to be fair. They get their arse completely handed to them. They make a complete pig's ear of this pursuit on motorbikes, but it is kind of fun to watch. And once it gets to night time, we get a lot of fun stalk and slash sequences with the other characters. There's lots of good kills, lots of instances where characters are just sneaking around and anything could happen at any moment. The actual mine is a brilliant horror location. And in the daytime, the desert and the hills look absolutely terrific in this movie. They might actually look better in this one than the first one somehow. The music's great as well. Harry Manfredini did the soundtrack for this film. He borrows a lot of the musical cues from Friday the 13th Part 4, which is weird when you first hear them. But they are damn creepy. It's just a shame that we don't actually have Jason in this mine running around instead of these two bumbling idiots. Jason Takes Nevada, that could have been a good film. Jason could have even got there on a boat, why not? I was just starting to think that this film was actually really good, and then the ending comes along, which is an absolute disaster zone. I don't know what Wes Craven was thinking of. When I did my review for the first film, I said that I really didn't like the moment with the cable, the trap that is meant to trip up the villain. I just found it too elaborate, too Home Alone-ish. But in this second film, Craven doubles down on that kind of thing and comes up with something even more ridiculous. So we're down to two protagonists by the ending. This guy, the boyfriend of Cass, I forget what the guy's name is, but he comes up with this idea. He comes up with it in about 3 seconds flat. It took me about 3 weeks to come up with the same thing, because it's like this Rube Goldberg mousetrap type scenario with cables and boulders and petrol and rope and all sorts going on. The ultimate aim is to get the villain trapped in this ring of fire, and then he'll be blown up with this super nitro fuel somehow. But this plan means that the two good characters will also end up trapped in the ring of fire. But the boyfriend's thought this through. The girl is going to run out through the ring of fire, just skip through the fire. This left me thinking that what makes them think that the villain won't also just do the same thing, right? And why doesn't the boyfriend just follow his girlfriend and jump through the ring of fire too? Because there's this other silly thing that he's set up. So he's got this boulder by this mine shaft that's got a cable around it, and the idea is that once the girl leaves the ring of fire, she will push this boulder into the mine shaft, and then the cable will become taut, and the boyfriend will grab hold of the cable. This will pull him through the ring of fire, but on the floor. So he's going to go through the fire part, right? He's going to get really badly burned, in theory. So I don't know why they think this is going to work, but it's so elaborate. Why not just jump through the damn flames? I don't understand it. It's really just bizarre and bonkers. It's crazy. Unless I've missed something, I don't get how any of this setup has any reasonable logic to it whatsoever. Before we wrap up, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I've got for this. I had completely forgotten that I've got a really good special edition Blu-ray for this. Here it is. It cost me about £16, I'd say, back when I got it, and it comes with tons of stuff. If I can just get the box out, it's a little bit tight. Yeah, it's got absolutely tons of features on here. A commentary track by The Hysteria Continues, a making of documentary, interviews, trailers, all the bits and bats that you might expect on an Arrow Blu-ray. But this edition also comes with a booklet about the making of the film, which is extremely cool, and also a poster. I'll quickly just hold this up. So here's the poster of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and another version on the back, although I think I prefer this one. I think the orange just suits the movie somehow. It reminds me of the desert that the movie is set in, and also the magical ring of fire, of course. I'm not sure the wife's going to let me get away with hanging this one on the wall, given that we have 3 young kids, but nice to have in the actual Blu-ray case, I suppose. But yeah, terrific edition of the film. And even though I've been fairly critical of it, it's not a complete washout. It's not a terrible movie. It's an average one. But I don't feel a great sadness that I have this quite expensive set for a film that's not going to go on and become one of my favourites. It's all right, I'd say. But let's see what the Bag of Terror says. So let's get to it now. So we got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5. That is 1 down from the 4 that I gave the original film. This one's not quite as good, but it's okay. I mean, the good half of it is really good, and the bad half of it, I could sort of enjoy it again as a so bad it's good kind of thing. So I can see myself watching this film again and enjoying it. But there we go. That is The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. I'll be back again soon to do the reboot film from 2006, which I remember being really good. So I've got optimism for that one. Right, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.